Kia ora. This is John Winters, Supermarket Sleuth, speaking to you again from Auckland in New Zealand. And what are we talking about this week? Well, every now and again I do a special. And I'm doing a special this week on private label. Private label, we call it in down under in Australia and New Zealand, own label in the UK, or store label, perhaps in some other countries, but yes, own label. So what is own label? Well, own label is where the supermarket has its own brands in store. In the UK, most of the supermarkets have their name on the packaging and perhaps an additional sub-brand like Tesco's Finest. Some may also have a separate name. In New Zealand, we tend to have separate names for the private label. Foodstuffs, which is the cooperative in there, 3 supermarkets. Well, one's convenience store in North Island and a supermarket in the South Island, Foursquare. And the other's New World and Pack and Save. They have a brand called PAMS, which is the initials of the 2 people who launched it, PANMS. So PAMS is the private label brand. And with Countdown, they tend to use the Woolworths brand and Woolworths this or Woolworths that. As their private label with the Woolworths logo, so they have their name on the packaging. But how old is private label? Well, private label actually has been around a long time. People don't realise that once upon a time when it was the grocer and you walked up to the counter to be served, like Open All Hours with Ronnie Barker and David Jason, that was private label because they weighed out whatever you wanted, flour, sugar, rice or whatever you needed in a brown bag, and that was private label. It didn't have any names. These were commodities that you bought, and obviously they had brands in the stores in those days, a few brands, not many, and that was private label. So it's been around a long time. And what happened was it evolved, and I think it evolved because the supermarket owners are renowned for having what I call busman's holidays. They go to Europe and they go to the United States, and they look, the supermarket owners, male or female or both, like to have a wander around the supermarkets just to see what's happening there, and they get ideas from what they see. And so they picked up ideas and they picked up the private label because private label in the UK own label has been around a long time. And so they came back and they decided they'd start a private label here. Now, originally when it started, it was Me Too. It was a copy. It was a copy of the commodities. They started with commodities and they just copied it and put it in very basic packaging, not very exciting, a bit like the Tesco's value packaging used to be, which was blue and white stripes and just Tesco's value on it. That was the brand, and they started in a similar way to that and carried on. But over the course of time, they started to move away from commodities and they started to move into categories. They have a team in these supermarkets who focus on the private label brands, and they're separate entirely from the rest of the business of the supermarket, and they're responsible for private label. So they do a lot of research as to what's happening, and they obviously research the supermarkets around the world and see what they're doing. And they look at the categories and they decide where they can a private label will work very well, and they've gradually gone into categories, not so many as in the UK, but things like cornflakes in breakfast cereal. They started off with cornflakes and went into others of the basic categories that we used to have in cornflakes, like Rice Krispies and things like that at the beginning, and went into that. And then over the course of time, they have moved into other categories as well, or spread. They become more driven by what others are doing in other parts of the world, and have decided that they won't stick to basic things. They will branch out and do their own things and have their own varieties and their own flavours in the various areas that they do. And they're not sticking any longer to just copying, they're bringing something new. Now, about 3 years ago, Pam's foodstuffs brand decided that they would go into a different level of private label, so a basic, sort of value end, and then a more premium end. And they hit upon the idea, I wonder where they got it from, of calling it Pam's Finest. Oh yes, now I remember, Tesco. Yes, they saw Tesco's Finest and thought, Tesco Finest, that looks good. It looked premium. The packaging is very good, black and white. And so they did the same, black and white packaging and Pam's Finest and a colour picture on the front, and really made it look very smart, and went into other types of varieties like flavourings for food and herbs and things like that, and put it into a smaller box, a nice box, or a smart way of actually using it. And they went from there to do their own thing and to introduce variants that the national brands didn't have. And that was very interesting. And they also went into ice cream, and they went into a lot of categories in this country. They didn't go into chocolate, which they've done in the UK. And I think maybe this country is a bit too small, and there's a lot of brands in chocolate anyway, so they didn't go into that. But they certainly went into a lot of other brands. Now, let's have a look at how this happens. And how does it happen? Well, it's... they first of all decide what they're going to do in terms of the contents, which category, what variant it's going to be, and then they've got to get the design done for the packaging. So they've got to get all this done. They've got to get the packaging prepared, printed, and so on. And of course, they have to get it made. Now, supermarkets are not manufacturers. Some people may think, oh, well, Tesco makes this, or Woolworths makes this, or New World makes this, or Countdown, excuse me. No, they don't. They put it out to tender generally, or they'll go to a manufacturer that they use regularly and give it to them and see what price it will come out at. And of course, the price is a cost price. Normally, in many cases, the manufacturers have their own brands, national brands, and this is a sort of an add-on to the production line that actually helps pay the cost of overheads. So manufacturers quite enjoy it. They tend to keep it quite quiet. They keep it secret. In fact, Aldi, which I'll come on to, Aldi, the German discounter, they do use some manufacturers in New Zealand, as they use other manufacturers in the countries that they operate. And there is a clause in the contract, which is two important clauses here. One, the contract must not be publicised in any way. They must not talk about that they're doing any work for Aldi. And secondly, they must also, the Aldi can go into their facilities, their factories at any time to check. And that's an important point. They don't say, oh, we're coming in tomorrow, so I'll just let you know we're coming, and so that the manufacturer can get ready. Oh, no, they don't do that. They want to catch the manufacturer out, just in case he's not doing what they want. So they come in any old time just to see what's happening. And that's good, I think. But yes, so they get other companies to manufacture for them. And as far as overheads are concerned, they use their own flyers and perhaps their websites to promote their own brand there. And of course, there's no cost to them to that because it's their flyer, their website. So that's why, and there's no real marketing going on for private label. It's just there and see it and help yourself. And that's why they can come in cheaper than the national brands, because they don't, marketing is a big part of brands these days, and they don't go down that road. So that helps. But interestingly enough, What they also do now, let's talk about Aldi and Lidl first of all. Well, Aldi and Lidl are German discounters who are renowned, Aldi in particular, for private label. Most of their products, packaged goods, are private label, but they choose their own brands and they make up brands as they go along for the private label. So they don't have Aldi on the packaging at all, and so it looks, to all intents and purposes, like a separate brand, and all different names throughout the store, no linking between them, and that helps with selling to people who don't realise it's a private label brand. But they also are fussy about quality, as are all the supermarkets who have private label done for them, making sure the quality is what they expect, and that's important. But the other thing they do, and I should perhaps at this point just mention another important person in this field of private label, was a man called Albert Goubet. He's a Welshman. He's still alive, lives in Wales, and he had key markets in the UK, which was very much based upon that, very basic shelving and wire baskets for doing wire bins, to doing specials and so on. Very basic, and he certainly did aimed at private label. That was his focus, and he opened a number of supermarkets in New Zealand called Three Guys. And Three Guys, which was the number 3 followed by the word guys, that was very basic. It was like Tesco's fine value packaging, very basic packaging, and he was going for basic Me Too's, and also he had obviously for it to be a supermarket, it had to have fresh in there, and so that was in there, and he did basic things, and that worked for a while. Not too many stores he had, but eventually he decided to pull out, and gradually the Three Guys stores closed until we were down to one. He sold that to Progressive Enterprises, as was in New Zealand, and they found an operator, they found an owner, and they sold the business to a private owner who was, it was like a franchise. He had to get all his product from Progressive, and that went on for a while, but it wasn't working for him in the end, so he changed the name to Fresh Choice, which is one of the franchises owned by Woolworths Australia in this country, and it still is today. So that was Three Guys, but Aldi certainly is a big player in the private label market, as is Lidl. Lidl tends to have more brands, and it doesn't source a great deal of its product where it operates locally. It tends to go to one supplier in the world, in Europe, and get everything for every store. And so that can work against it, because then certain things like coffee is a good example. Coffee, it has a different flavour for many different countries. They like a certain coffee flavour, and it varies from country to country. But Lidl tends to go to one supplier. In the past it has been in Eastern Europe, and the coffee can not necessarily be to your particular taste, whereas Aldi tends to use local manufacturers, so they get over that problem. Yes, but private label, the other interesting part about private label and talking about using own names is, of course, the supermarkets are into private label beer and private label wine. Again, they get a manufacturer to supply it. Sometimes they all use the manufacturer's brand name, and which will not be promoted by the manufacturer in this country. It'll become a sort of private label for that supermarket, or else that's in the case of beer. In the case of wine, they make up a name, and around Australia and New Zealand there are so many bays that don't actually exist, but they do on wine labels, and those are really private labels, or things like Clear Skin as a good example, and other private labels that exist, and they'll do this for wine. So it's gone into those categories as well, because you can make a lot of money out of wine. And what they do is they buy an amount of wine from a manufacturer in whatever type it is, Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, Sauvignon Blanc, and then they'll just slap their own label on it, and of course no promotion at all. They might promote it occasionally in their flyer, but that's all. And of course they make more money out of that because there's no overhead like they have for the other parts of the supermarket. So it is big business, private label, and it's certainly here to stay and will continue for many years to come, I foresee, and will grow like it grows in this country. The one that they haven't done, I've been watching, of course, is block chocolate in New Zealand, and that's probably because we've got a strong brand, Whittaker's, which is a New Zealand brand, which a lot of New Zealanders enjoy and buy, and they tend to be a reasonably good price. They started, when I first came here, it was $2.99 a block of 200 grams, and Whittaker's have been trying to push it up ever since, and it's now reached over $5 for full price, but they do a lot of specials on this, and specials tend to bring it down to $4.30. And I'm a chocoholic with dark chocolate, so I buy mine when it's on special, and it tends to be on special first on one side of the supermarket industry, then on the other. So I just buy 2 or 3 blocks, and that lasts me till the next time it's on special. But Cadbury is the other player in the market, and they're cheaper, obviously, because they're competing against Lindt and other manufacturers there are. So they come in quite low, and I don't think for the supermarkets it's not worth them doing it, because I don't think they'll achieve much by putting an own label in that particular area. So that's it, private label, just a chat about private label and what it is and what's behind it. And you can catch me on Facebook. I've got a Supermarket Sleuth page, and I've got a checkout page. Checkout is the book I wrote about supermarkets some time ago, and I'm updating it as I go, and I'm reading it, actually doing an audio each week on that, so you can listen to that on the checkout page. I'm also live on Magic Talk, which is a New Zealand radio station, and they're on a Saturday morning New Zealand time on a program called Weekend Life at 10:45. But if you miss it, you can listen to it on my Supermarket Sleuth page. And if you want to listen to it live, 10:45 a.m. Saturday morning, that is, would be a.m. If you go to magic.co.nz, and then at the top of the page there is talk and music, click on the talk lozenge, and then you'll find me there. But otherwise, as I say, you can listen to it, the recording, on my Supermarket Sleuth page. So that's all for this week, folks, and I'll be back here again next week. Bye for now.